Can we view the heinous institution of slavery through the lens of narcissism? Is there a correlation, or is it a mere conjecture? Welcome to the intriguing nexus of narcissism and slavery, a topic that invites us to delve into the depths of human psychology and historical practice. At its core, narcissism is an inflated sense of self-importance and a deep need for excessive attention and admiration. It's a personality trait that can manifest in grandiosity, entitlement, and a lack of empathy. On the other hand, slavery, a heinous practice that spans across centuries and continents, is the harsh reality of humans treating other humans as property, denying them their basic rights and freedoms. It's not difficult to see how these two concepts might intersect. The grandiose sense of self that characterizes narcissism could potentially justify the ownership of other human beings. The absence of empathy, a common trait among narcissists, might have made it easier for slave owners to ignore the suffering they inflicted. Yet it's crucial to remember that not every slave owner was a narcissist, and not every narcissist would condone slavery. It's a complex relationship that demands a nuanced understanding. Moreover, this discussion is not about justifying or simplifying the horrors of slavery. Rather, it's about exploring the psychological factors that might contribute to such inhumane practices. It's about asking if certain personality traits, like narcissism, can make people more susceptible to justifying cruelty and brutality. Furthermore, we must consider the role of societal norms and power dynamics. It's important to remember that many societies normalize slavery, and those in power often perpetuated it. Narcissism might have been one factor, but it was certainly not the only one. As we delve deeper, let's keep an open mind and explore the possibility of a narcissism-slavery connection. This exploration will not only shed light on the past, but also guide us in preventing such atrocities in the future. Stay with us as we continue to unravel this fascinating yet disturbing correlation. Narcissism, a term often thrown around lightly, has profound implications. But what does it really entail? Let's delve into the world of narcissism, a personality disorder that's far more complex than the simple self-love it's often reduced to. It's characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, an intense focus on oneself, and a deep need for excessive attention and admiration. Narcissists often have troubled relationships, as they lack the ability to empathize with others. This lack of empathy is a defining trait of narcissism. It's not just about being unable to put oneself in another's shoes. It's a lack of interest or understanding in the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of others. This indifference to the emotional states of others can often manifest as cruelty or disregard, as the narcissist is primarily focused on their own needs and desires. Another key characteristic is a sense of entitlement. Narcissists often believe that they are inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment. This stems from their inflated self-perception, which leads them to believe that they are superior to others. This sense of entitlement can manifest in a variety of ways, from expecting others to comply with their demands without question, to disregarding the rights and boundaries of others. Narcissists also have a tendency to exploit others to achieve their own ends. This exploitation is often justified in their minds by their perceived superiority. They may use manipulation, deceit, or even force to get what they want, often without any regard for the impact on others. But it's important to remember that narcissism exists on a spectrum. Just as not all self-centered individuals are narcissists, not all narcissists are inherently cruel or exploitative. Many people with narcissistic traits lead normal lives, often unaware of their tendencies. It's when these traits become extreme and destructive that we see the dark side of narcissism emerge. These traits, when amplified, can lead to dire consequences. Could they have fueled the institution of slavery? Looking back at historical accounts, we see certain traits in slave owners that mirror narcissistic behavior. Narcissism, as we know, is characterized by a grandiose sense of self-importance, a lack of empathy for others, and a need for excessive admiration. Now let's take a step back in time and view the world through the lens of a slave owner. The first trait that stands out is a lack of empathy. Slave owners were often indifferent to the suffering they inflicted upon their slaves. They were able to separate themselves from the pain and hardship they were causing, much like a narcissist's inability to empathize with the feelings of others. This lack of empathy allowed them to rationalize their actions and suppress any feelings of guilt or remorse. Next, we see a pronounced sense of entitlement. Slave owners viewed themselves as superior to their slaves, justifying their ownership of other human beings as a natural order of things. They believed they had the right to control and exploit others for their own gain, a sentiment that aligns with the narcissist's belief that they are entitled to special treatment and admiration. Finally, we come to the trait of exploitative behavior. Narcissists are known to exploit others without regard for their feelings or welfare. This behavior is akin to the actions of slave owners who exploited slaves for their labor, viewing them as property rather than human beings. The slave owner's ability to dehumanize and exploit their slaves is a stark reflection of the narcissist's tendency to use others for their own benefit. The parallels are uncanny. But does this mean all slave owners were narcissists, or is it a broader societal issue? It's important to remember that our understanding of narcissism and its manifestations is based on current psychological theories. Applying these theories to historical figures and events requires careful analysis and consideration. We cannot definitively label all slave owners as narcissists, but the similarities in behavior are certainly thought-provoking. The similarities between narcissistic traits and the behaviors of slave owners are striking. But is it a mere coincidence or a deeper connection? Let's delve a bit deeper. Narcissism, as we've explored, is often characterized by grandiosity, lack of empathy, and a need for admiration. These traits mirror the behaviors of many slave owners throughout history. They saw themselves as superior, lacked empathy for the enslaved, and sought admiration from their peers for their wealth and power. But could these narcissistic traits have contributed to the justification and perpetuation of slavery? It's a possibility worth considering. The grandiosity of narcissism could have allowed slave owners to view themselves as above or better than those they enslaved. This sense of superiority could have provided a convenient justification for the inhumane treatment of others. Meanwhile, the lack of empathy inherent in narcissism would have made it easier to ignore the pain and suffering endured by the enslaved. This absence of empathy, coupled with the need for admiration and validation, could have contributed to the brutality and cruelty often associated with slavery. But does this mean that all slave owners were narcissists? Not necessarily. People are complex and can't be reduced to a single personality trait. However, this analysis does suggest that narcissistic traits may have played a role in facilitating and perpetuating the system of slavery. Furthermore, it's worth noting that narcissistic traits are not exclusive to slave owners or any particular group of people. They exist across societies and cultures, and in different periods of history. Many of us exhibit these traits to some extent, though hopefully not to the extremes seen in examples like slavery. The narcissism slavery connection is intriguing, but it's important to remember that it's just one perspective. While it provides a lens through which we can examine historical atrocities, it should not be seen as the only explanation or used to oversimplify complex societal issues. As we continue to explore the depths of human behavior and psychology, it's crucial to maintain an open mind and consider multiple viewpoints. We've journeyed through the murky waters of narcissism and slavery. What are the key takeaways? The potential connection between narcissism and slavery is a complex and multifaceted issue. We've explored the traits of narcissism, such as an inflated sense of self-importance, lack of empathy, and the pursuit of power and control. These traits, when examined in the context of slavery, provide a compelling argument for the potential role of narcissism in the institution of slavery. The narcissistic perspective, characterized by a disregard for others and a focus on self-interest, could indeed have contributed to the justification of owning slaves. The slave owners, consumed by their own self-importance and power, may have been blinded to the humanity of those they enslaved, viewing them merely as property or tools to further their own interests. However, it's important to note that not all slave owners were necessarily narcissistic. Narcissism is a specific personality disorder, and while some slave owners may have displayed traits associated with narcissism, it would be a sweeping generalization to label all slave owners as such. Our analysis also touched on the role of empathy, or rather the lack of it. Could a lack of empathy have contributed to an individual becoming a slave? While it's possible, it's a simplistic view of a complex issue. Many other factors, including societal norms, economic conditions, and political structures, played significant roles in the institution of slavery. We've also explored the question of whether narcissism adds to cruelty and brutality. While narcissism can lead to a lack of empathy and a disregard for others, it doesn't automatically translate into cruelty or brutality. However, in the context of slavery, these narcissistic traits may have exacerbated the inhumane treatment of slaves. So, were narcissistic slave owners evil? This question, like the topic itself, is complex and subjective. Evil is a term fraught with moral and ethical implications, and its application depends largely on one's perspective. While the narcissism slavery connection offers an intriguing perspective, it's crucial to remember that it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle.